8, 17, 25 with bloodshot eyes. I could still sleep on most nights. I could still, but sometimes. Don't know.
Welcome to day 17, mile 17. It was about an 8:20 pace. Hey, today I just wanted to talk about this book that I read like a year ago that's been on my mind this week. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And basically she's a researcher, she's an academic, and I can't summarize the book in like a 2-minute video. You should go and read it. But basically in the book, she points out that the one single most important factor for someone to be successful is their level of grit. And I will define grit. Gritty people have a persistent desire to develop. It's not about looking backward with dissatisfaction, but about looking forward and wanting to grow. So I read this book initially just because I wanted to grow. I wanted to, in theory, get better. And little did I know, I actually wasn't very gritty. I grew up on a farm doing manual labor, playing sports, lifting weights, being very active. Like, I was convinced that I was someone who was pretty gritty. And she actually has a grit test you can take online, and you self-assess, which is obviously not totally objective. But even in the self-assessment, I wasn't that gritty. And I think there's something that happened from whenever I was growing up to sort of when I was away from college. I'd had some time to live on my own, develop my own habits, and I really had just acclimated to comfort. And this was kind of one of the first books back along my journey of let's chase after some really hard things and try and grow. I think that grittiness and persistence is something worth thinking about and worth practicing. So there's a critical element to developing grit that is different than a lot of other sort of methods of development, and that's called deliberate practice. And there's 2 steps to deliberate practice. The first step is to set a stretch goal, and basically you, as you're doing that activity, then you've started trying to do the goal, you zero in on one aspect of your overall performance, and you intentionally seek out challenges you can't meet. So you're hungry to discover what you did wrong, you're hungry to try again, and just keep doing that cycle over and over and over. As you get the feedback, you find out you fall short, you keep going, and then you start over with a new goal. And you just keep sort of zeroing in on one element, get better at that element, find the next one. And this is different than just repetition. Like Malcolm Gladwell has the famous 10,000 hour rule to become an expert. And even that gets misquoted a lot because that kind of person that's getting 10,000 hours, it has to be this kind of practice. It has to be really deliberate to identify weakness, to work on that, and to grow. Because if I just do something in a mediocre way for 10,000 hours, I don't get any better. Actually, as I'm filming this live, I remember an example of this in my own life. So growing up, and even still, I had really bad handwriting, like almost illegible. And I remember staying up late one night and working on my handwriting. But the problem was I wanted to make the process of deliberate practice a lot less deliberate and a lot more fast. I wanted to get it over with. I wanted there to be some kind of magic that happened, that if I just put in the work, that I would somehow get better. And my mom came in and discovered me working away, and at first was glad, like, hey, this is really great, you're practicing your handwriting. But then she looked at it and she saw how fast I was going, and I was just motoring as fast as I could go, which meant that I wasn't actually practicing better handwriting. I wasn't identifying areas that I needed to improve and practice those areas. I was just trying to blow through it. And thus, I didn't get any better. It's kind of a similar thing. We've got to be really deliberate in identifying those weak areas and digging into those. So it's one by one, subtle refinements add up to mastery. The interesting thing too is you might see someone who's really excellent at their craft, like a musician or an actor or a whoever, athlete, and you think, oh, well, they're just so talented. They were born with this. They were born with this innate bend towards this activity. And in reality, even for them, this kind of deliberate practice is tough because they still have those little areas that they need to zoom in on and refine and get better at. So this is something that's really taxing for everybody, and you can't do 40 hours a week of deliberate practice. Like, there's probably a couple workhorses out there that can, but by and large, it's so taxing that you can only do it for, 1, 2, 3 hours a day, because you are intentionally trying so hard to identify those things and work on them that it really wears you out. And that's a rule of thumb that she puts in there. I think part of me reading this book was a rediscovery of my love of a challenge and my love of something that's really difficult, because some things in life came fairly easy to me, and then I chose other things that were just comfort-based, that were really easy, that were just homey and nice, like let's sit around and play video games and eat junk food and not really challenge ourselves to grow. Let's just have fun with friends. Let's hang out a lot. Let's just read books that are fun books, that don't challenge us, that don't grow us that much. And the problem was that I slipped into some kind of like apathy. I'm okay just to be whatever. I don't know why I'm not advancing or growing in life or getting promoted or becoming a better person. But at the same time, I wasn't willing to accept the responsibility that was my job to do that it was my job to do this deliberate practice and identify those areas where I needed to grow. Part of me discovering that was reading this book. Here's a few more notes. So here she's comparing and contrasting the optimistic versus pessimistic viewpoints. It says, pessimists assume permanent and pervasive causes of suffering. I'll read that again. Pessimists assume permanent and pervasive causes of suffering. You don't have to believe that you're a pessimist overall in life to believe about this kind of thing that in this pessimistic way, because I believe this way, but I also would tell you openly that I was an optimist. And my version of optimism was joking around, trying to find the brighter side, finding the silver lining, trying to keep the mood light, trying to keep my emotions high. I thought that's what it meant to be optimistic. Yet at the same time, I believed that the things that held me back and the things that made me really unhappy were just like the gravity around me, the air I breathe. I can do nothing about this. It wasn't even a conscious recognition of that. It was just like belief. It just was. Permanent and pervasive. So pervasive meaning hard to tie down, hard to have any control over, hard to stop. It's just a freight train that can't be slowed down. Where in contrast to the pessimist, the optimist searches for temporary and specific causes of suffering. So basically, the optimist sees a problem as something logical that's not a sentence, it's not a permanent situation, it's a temporary circumstance that can change. So they work to change it. The pessimist sees a permanent condition or quality in themselves that's bad, even though they're talking about the same thing the optimist has going on too. They feel doomed and are not motivated to change or improve their circumstance because they see no way out. The same objective event leads to very different subjective responses. And it's not to say that these are going to be easy changes that we have to make. Like maybe we need to move, go to a different city, get away from a bad situation, get away from a toxic job. Like that we have to make some big changes sometimes, but you can make a lot of changes. Like it's pretty amazing the things that we choose to believe and the permanence that we lay on our condition. Like, oh, that guidance counselor told me that if I wanted to study kinesiology, I needed to become a doctor, and doctoring is too hard for me, so I better go study construction. What? That's just some weird logic. That was logic that I chose. That's how I chose my college degree. It's like one counselor kind of dissuaded me and said the road was hard and long. I'm going to go do something else. And I don't necessarily regret that, but I regret my lack of grit in that situation. Part of this 30-day challenge where I'm running a mile every day, right after my last 30-day challenge of doing 100 push-ups a day, is just to keep practicing this. Like obviously it's not deliberate practice in the way that Angela Duckworth, the author of Grit, was talking about, but it's just practice in general to say, how do I learn to persist? How do I learn that it really is up to me whether or not I give up on this project, on whatever it is, and I'm going to choose to just keep going. So I just wanted to recommend you the book, to challenge you to do something that caused you to be gritty and that in general pushed you a little bit. So, as always, thanks for watching. See you later. Tomorrow, we run.